I'm going to switch into the views directory and open up our home.blade.php file. So far we've referenced a lot of scripts, but now we need to set up our form. So for example, somebody needs to have the option to create a new contact, right? So let's do that now. I'll open up a form and we're going to give it an ID of add contact. And within here, let's do this. Let's add a label for the first name. And then we will set up an input type equals text, and we'll set up the ID as well as the name. I could also take advantage of Laravel's Blade engine to clean some of this up, but because this isn't a Laravel specific tutorial, I'm not going to worry about that. So let's switch these out to last name. And then we want to do the same here for the email address. That looks good. And you know what? I think we need to do one more for a description that will be optional. We'll do description. And here, rather than a regular text box, let's use a text area. All right, that looks good to me. So let's view that on the page. I load it. Yeah, area for first name, last name, email address, and description. And then we want to do one more to submit it. Input type equals submit. And the value will be add contact. There we go. All right, so it's not pretty at all, but this will do the trick. So now we have a form for the user to create a new contact, but where would we write the functionality to process this? Because you think about it, what we need to do here is say, all right, when the user clicks on this button or submits the form, we then need to capture all of the values from here. We need to create a new model. Maybe we need to add it to a collection. Where would you do that sort of processing? Well, I think we need to create a new view called add contact view. So let's do that now. I'm going to switch into our views.js file, and we'll say comment for add contact view. And let's set that up, app.views.add contact. So the very first thing we need to do, if I switch out of distraction-free mode, is we need to set up a reference to this. In our case, we're not creating a new DOM element and throwing it into the DOM. We're working with one that already exists. So in that case, I can set up L to add contact. And now we've set up a reference to this. Next, we're going to set up our events. So I will say events, and what I want to listen for is when this form has been submitted. So I will say submit, and when that runs, we'll say add contact. Now, this form is going to try to post back, so I will prevent the default action. And then we will log add contact now. So now we have our view for this. Before we can use it, we need to create a new instance of it. So let's do that within our initialize method. So I will say var add contact view equals a new instance of app.views.add contact. Let's try it out. So I'm going to reload the page and hit add contact, and sure enough, that did fire. All right, so now we have this nice contained area where we know if we need to edit anything related to the process of adding a new contact, well, we know we need to go to the add contact view. So let's remove our console.log and get started. Well, the first thing I see is that I'm going to need access to the collection. So I can do app.contacts, or if I want to inject it, which I tend to prefer, why don't we go to the top and send through the collection, app.contacts. Now, when we go to add contact, if you think about it, we have a reference to this .collection. So now all we need to do is add a new item to this collection, and we know how to do that now. This.collection.create will specify the first name, will be this, and we'll say first name.val. Now this might look a little foreign to you. All we're doing here, that's the exact same thing as saying this.l.find first name. But Backbone gives us this little bit of sugar so that we can say this.$, and that will map accordingly. So we're going to set the first name equal to what we found from the view. So we're going to hunt down the first name input and grab its value. Then I will do this just a couple more times for the last name, the email address, and the description. To see if that worked, let's log this.collection and see what we get. So we will say Harry Doe, harry@example.com, and my friend. So now when I hit add contact, it looks like there was an error, but let's see if it did work. We did add it to the collection. So now we have this new item, and if we look in the attributes, we can see yes. All right, so we did successfully add it to the collection. But remember, when we call create, that's doing a handful of things. It's adding it to the collection, but it's also firing off that AJAX request to the server. And what is it doing? Well, if we follow that RESTful pattern, it's going to send a post request to the collection. So let's see what we got in return. Column not found, unknown column updated at in field list. And we ran into that last time. So let's switch to our contacts model, and we'll say public timestamps equals false. I don't want Laravel to automatically attempt to set those for me. All right, one more time. Let's make sure this works. Harry Doe, harry@example.com, my friend. So I'm going to hit add contact, and that seems to work. It updated the collection, and now if I go to SQL Pro and I refresh, take a look, we did add Harry Doe. All right, so now we've more or less implemented the necessary functionality to add a new contact. That wasn't too tough at all. Now there's one thing I want you to see though. If I view app.contacts, and let's open it up and let's just grab the very first item right here. Notice that it has this ID field set up. Well, let's go to the next one, number 2 maybe. Well, if we open that, yeah, that has an ID as well. But what about the one that we just added? Well, let's see. We go into attributes. We have the description, the email address, the first name, and the last name, but no ID. And that's because it's adding the new data to the collection before it's heard back from the server. But that may be a problem in the future because I'm going to anticipate needing that ID. So in these cases, what you can do is, as a second parameter of the create method, and you can do the same thing when you're setting values on a model as well, I can say wait to true. And that means it's going to wait before setting the new values. All right, so this looks good, and you'll see more about that in the future, by the way. The next thing that I want to do is make sure that we validate this, because take a look right now. If I just hit add contact, now if I say app.contacts.last.toJSON, and I open this up, by the way, the last method will return the last one in the collection. You see now we've just set empty values. So what I want to do is switch over to our models and validate this. So we'll say validate. It's going to accept the attributes. And we'll say if not attributes.firstName or not attributes.lastName, then we will return a first and last name are required. And now if we try this, and before we do, let's go back to SQL Pro, and let's make sure we get rid of all of that. Delete. Try it one more time, and I will hit add contact. This time, if we try to view the most recent model attributes, notice that it didn't work. It didn't process, so the most recent one's still showing the one that we did earlier. Good. Let's do the same thing for the email address. Return, please enter a valid email address. And that should be enough. So watch what happens if we store this in a variable, and we will call it new contact. And then at the bottom, we're going to log new contact. Let's see what we get. So I try to submit the form without setting any values, and notice that if it failed validation, false is going to be returned. However, if we set a valid one, Doe, chuck@example.com, and we hit add contact, now if it's successful, it looks like the instance is going to be returned. Good, so then at that point you can hook into it as you would want and maybe display a list of the error messages or anything like that. We're not going to worry about that though, because we have a lot to do. Now that we've written the necessary functionality to add a new contact, of course in the next video we need to display those contacts. So I'll see you then.